Matt Todd, welcome to the show today.
God bless you, woman. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for having me in this is like so cool for me. And I'm going to make note of it on my podcast right now, right here, right now. We're going to make note of it that we are actually in the Idaho PTA office. And this is why I'm like wearing my sweatshirt and like my vest.
I brought a heater in here. There's a heater that's turned on. It just takes a while to get up to temp.
I know, it's great. But so the reason we're here is because like you're spending a majority of your time recording podcasts with people from the Capitol, and Idaho PTA says, hey, we want an informed public. We want people to have information. And so we're going to Idaho PTA offered their podcast, not their podcast space, their office space to you as kind of a way to support the podcast right now during the legislative session. Will you talk about that for a little bit first as we get started today?
1,000%.
Okay.
So, and again, just the nature of the PTA and the off. Okay. So like bottom line is, everyone knew coming into this legislative session that school funding, vouchers, school choice, these would be if not the most important topic, but one of the top three, obviously. And I don't think anything's eclipsed it so far. So we knew that coming in, and I needed a space downtown because I've been talking to so many legislators that they just can't make it out to my studio, which is about half an hour away. And there were some different ideas about getting a space. I don't get paid for this at this point. So I was like, well, I don't have money to like rent a spot. And you as president were like, look, the PTA has a spot. And I said instantaneously, okay, Alexis, like, thank you very much for the offer. I just want to be clear. I'm talking to everybody. Like, I'm going to talk to the people that want the public schools to burn down. I'm going to talk to the people that like think the public schools are, our savior. Like, I'm going to talk to everybody about these issues, and not from a, like, I'm going to get them and tell them what I think. And you need to know that. And you instantly said, that's what we want. We want the conversation around education to be had. Let's flush it out for better or for worse. And I will tell you, because of the PTA support, we at the ranch and the Truth and Media Foundation that supports the ranch, we are the only mass communication platform in the state of Idaho that has waded deeply with all sides into the education debate. I'm talking about the creators of the bills that are making school choice. I've had two of them on. I'm having a third this week. I'm talking about policy centers like Mountain State Policy Center. The CEO of that is coming on this week, and he is a ravenous school choicer, which is awesome. I've had Ron Nate on twice, who is the president of IFF. He has very aggressively advocated for school choice, and I have had you and Quinn Perry from Idaho School Boards Association. I'm having Stoney Winston from the Idaho Superintendent Association. I've had Dr. Derek Bubb, who's a superintendent for West Ada. I've had both sides of the conversation because the PTA supported the conversation around this. And again, I'm so grateful to you guys.
It's amazing. Thank you. I'm glad you're grateful. You're welcome. It's
Thank
you. Thank you. Because one of the things that like I know for just even like my podcast, Our Kids, Our Schools, is that I really believe that it's so important for the adults to come to the table to have the hard conversation. And one of the best ways that I think that can be fostered in our school communities is for people to have the information that they need to really have those conversations, whether that's like in their home, with their friend group and their neighbors, at school, whatever. That information, it's so important for it to be out there. And the fact that like your podcast is taking this deep dive into these topics, it really kind of feels like one of the first times, I don't know, like dare I say the first time in like history where some people have been able to really get access like in real time for what's unfolding at the Capitol in a way that they have never been able to before. And that is what I think is so awesome.
I appreciate that. I think it's super awesome too. Like I was talking to somebody just recently, they were saying, hey, look, you're part of the PTA. I'm like, yeah, I'm part of the PTA. Like, but like, I'm not like president or anything. Like, I'm just, whatever. And he said, well, could we get people in the PTA? And I was like, first off, you're asking if we can get people in the PTA. That is not my purview. Like, I have control over nothing. Like, I'm just a dude. But his idea was, hey, could we get people at the PTA in the grassroots level to talk about school choice at their local areas? I'm like, okay, yeah, you can. Like, you in the abstract, you can. But first off, like Quinn Perry, okay, ISBA government liaison, she goes around and talks about what school boards and schools are standing for, what the problems are, all of these things. It's like, are we going to get Quinn to go to 160 different school districts like throughout the area? Like, are we going to get Quinn to, jump on a Zoom call and educate everyone's like, it's an impossibility. And even if you wanted to grab a lead at every single school that has a PTA at it, educating that person and arming them with the appropriate material, and then having that material transferred from them to individuals in a localized manner. It's like the lift is so astronomical. And to your point, we don't have to do that. We can have conversations with education leaders here right now and fire out a link, and people can experience a really good, what I think is a really good conversation, predominantly because I just get to ask questions. I don't have to have any answers, but we can send that out and they can watch it on their phones. They can listen in their car. We can connect people like never before. And yeah, I think it's so cool.
It is so cool. And then, I mean, to your point, like we send this link out, and I was at like a local unit PTA recently, and it was like one of the things that was on their agenda was like the bill that Idaho PTA is supporting in regards to like parent tech awareness. And the local PTAs get to decide what they want to talk about, what's important to them. And that's the other thing that's like really great, is that this is not like a have to thing. Like you have to listen, you have to watch. This is available to you, and you get to use this resource if you want to. It's that fantastic.
It's really, really important. I think the upregulation of mass communication has really taken the world by surprise in the last 10 years. But if harnessed correctly, and you do the impossible lift of actually understanding how to communicate, because it's not like writing an essay. Like, no, it's not an article. It's not a news production. It's not all of these things. It's something different. And if you can do the heavy lift of grabbing that thing and understanding it like you do when you do your podcasts, man, you can communicate in a manner and with an ability that has never existed. And it's really, we're living in the future, Alexis Morgan.
We are living in the future. I actually read a book. It's called The Future You. It's super awesome. I think it's called The Future You. I'm pretty sure.
Is he skinnier?
No, it's not like you, like the future of Matt Todd. Okay. It's just like the future you. And one of the things that it talks about in this book that I actually really liked was it's not about predicting the future, but one of the things that it says is that like when we think about the future, we have to remember that the future is now. We're actually living in the future from 5 years ago or 6 months ago. And
I think this was a Kamala Harris speech.
It was not.
She's like, and tomorrow will be today. Tomorrow. She said that. I swear to God, she said that.
I think she might.
And we're living in the future from yesterday.
Gosh. That is not what this book is about, though. Okay. Let me be really clear. But what was kind of cool about it, though, was that it's like, okay, if you want this in your future, like if you want to have like this kind of outcome, then go back 50% and see where, like, retract yourself 50% to see where you need to be 50% of the way to get there. And then go back 25%, yada, yada, yada. It's actually a really cool like way to produce like good outcomes in your life. And also, what's the other thing I was going to say? Like, and also find people who are maybe already doing the thing that you're doing and learn from them. Like I actually had a conversation with a guy who's doing this really cool stuff with a podcast like over a year ago. And he has like a nonprofit and he's the executive director and all these different things. And he didn't know who I was, but I reached out to him and was like, hey, I'm this woman in Idaho and I know you're doing this thing down in Utah and I'd love to like learn from you about your processes.
Sure.
And so like he and I had this great conversation, and it wasn't that it served him so well. I was just really grateful that he had the conversation with me, but that it was like, oh my gosh, he's doing something that maybe could be in my future, but learning from him about how I could, lay out the next several steps is really valuable to me.
Right.
So anyways, that kind of like in the book, but the point is that like,
can I make a small comment about a book in the future you?
Yes.
It's not about Kamala Harris. It's I have a great appreciation for this. I can't remember if it was a Malcolm Gladwell book or doesn't matter. But the you know what? I think it was the book Making a Good Brain Great. It was written by a very famous neurologist, really interesting guy, and his advocating for neuroplasticity and essentially carving out the areas. He's like, listen, if you want to be somebody, if you're 20 and you want to be somebody that has like a successful marriage at 35 and like 1.5 kids or whatever, it's like, you don't have to get married at 20, but you have to start doing things that will sharpen and enhance your skills to being that person. He's like, so it's not that like you have to marry somebody at 20, but like you should date people who have similar interests in like long-term relationships and engage in difficult conversations. If you want to have a successful marriage at 35, don't be a perennial playboy, run around all weekend, do whatever. You're you're not going to develop the skills that are required to engage in that meaningful endeavor. And again, I have not read this book you're talking about, but I very much appreciate and agree with the idea that's like, okay, look, if this is what you want, what's the skill set involved with getting you to be this person? And if you can start honing those skills, even if you start at zero, like really poorly, right? Like I started my first I ordered my first mics off Amazon almost 6 years ago. I knew nothing about mics or anything. It was literally like, what does YouTube have to say about this? And you just start developing the skills. But there's like, if I want a future where I have a podcast that's even remotely reasonable, I have to develop these skills now and learn now. Unfortunately, I didn't have anybody in Utah that I knew that I could ask questions to, but like, YouTube was there and I just engaged in learning from people that have already done it. So yeah, like I love that idea.
Yeah. So to my point, you are living in the future. This is the future.
We are the future.
You are,
especially
this is
from
the
yesterday.
future you. Yes. This is the future
This is the future from yesterday.
Okay. So just a couple of days ago, I was on the Main Street podcast. It was actually kind of
Main Street, Idaho.
Main Street, Idaho.
Main Street, Idaho.
That's it. Thank you for clarifying. Main Street, Idaho. Main Street, Idaho podcast. That's the one I was on.
Yes.
And
they have a lot of heavy hitters, by the way. They've had multiple governors. They have lots of Idaho legislators. Like they've had Alex Adams, director of health and welfare, was on their show. Like they have Superintendent Critchfield was on the show. Like they have a lot of heavy hitters.
Yeah, and they are, like they're a really big podcast in Southeast Idaho. That's like where kind of their market is. And so the being on the podcast was great as like a parent and the Idaho State PTA president. And we got to talk about a lot of different things, which was awesome. But one of the things that he pulled out was that the Idaho PTA, one of our purposes, like one of our mission goals, is to help educate the public, just in terms of like providing information and all sorts of different things. So to the point of like supporting your podcast, all those, that encompasses that idea. So in that vein, one of the things that the thing that I really wanted to get to today on the show was talking about this event that we have coming up on April 26th. And I just really want people to mark their calendars for this because it's going to be super fantastic. So it's called the More Social Less Media event. It's on Saturday, April 26th. From 10 to 2, and it's going to be at Eagle High School. And we have several different nonprofits that are involved in this, and Idaho PTA is sponsoring it because we really want parents and teenagers and teachers and community members to understand the why, the how, and the what when we're talking about technology for our kids, and then also the impact on their mental health. So there's going to be all these different key players involved in this process, and I'm really excited for this event. And part of this started kind of in our journey together as you found your space for, you kind of found some space in technology. So will you tell me what about this event? Why do you think it's so important for people to show up to this?
I think there are a lot of and thank you for that. And I'm very excited for the event as well. I think there are a lot of assumptions that people make around tech that are just overwhelmingly not true. And it does not either get teased out to support, the more tech, the better our kids are in an education space. It's that's not true. There's no evidence saying the more tablets and Chromebooks you throw at them, the better off they're going to be. Or the assumption that we have to have one-to-one devices because we don't want our kids learning how to type on a keyboard when they're seniors in high school. It's okay, well, this does not follow that. I knew how to type on a keyboard in 7th grade, and that was the 90s, right? So there are a lot of problems, not just around education and tech, but tech in general. Well, this is where my daughter's friends are. This is a huge problem. Okay. Parents start to get an inclination that, look, my daughter or my child is on the phone too much. This is producing bad results, which people will inevitably come to, right? And because that actually is a fact, it's not good for them. So people come to that, and then they get stuck in this weird thing where it's okay, this isn't good for them, but this is where all their friends are. And I can't take away their friends. So these are competing principles, right? Where it's I as a parent should not be able to remove my child from their social circle because that's bad for them. Okay. But tech is also bad for them, and I should remove things that's bad for them. Right. So it's you have these two competing principles that essentially go to war with each other. And the problem with being stalled out and giving these things equal weight is that it perpetuates the actual problem, which is your kids are going to be harmed by social media universally. Like they'll be sent pornography. They'll view individuals differently. They'll be socially manipulated. They'll degrade their value of what you say to them, because there is no way to make parents less relevant more quickly than giving them a cell phone. Because although you might say you are an awesome person, like you're great, don't worry about anything people say, like, oh my gosh, thanks mom. Like, that's great. I love you. Give them a cell phone, and the anonymous person who they have no idea who it is saying that their hair looks like trash will come send them home like in tears, right? The problem is that people, for this particular example, people don't take into account that it's like, listen, this is where your kid's friends are because this is where your kid is. If your kid exists on social media for hours a day, yes, they will develop relationships based on social media. If you took the phone away and like drove by a climbing gym and didn't even stop the car, just opened the car door and like kicked the kid out. And it's like 2 hours a day, the kid's hanging out at the climbing gym. I guarantee you within a month, they would have friends at the climbing gym. And you know what you can't do when you're climbing on a wall? You can't be on your phone, right? So there are these problems that people are trying to grapple with that we've never had to grapple with before, where it's like, okay, the medium in which my friends or my kids have social interactions is damaging, but I can't remove it because then they won't have social interactions. These are stalling out parents from making the tough but appropriate decision of more social, less media. Let's get our kids back into the real world. Let's create communities for them in the real world that propagate and promote real world interactions. And then it's not like they'll never have tech, but like, let's start with your foundation of life is in the real world. And I think that's something that is being addressed, or at least brought to light, by the more social, less media movement. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Thank you. I love that. I totally agree. It is a beautiful thing. And so some of the things that we have, I just wanted to highlight some of the stuff that's like going to be happening during this event. So we are bringing in, our keynote speaker is Chris McKenna, who is from the organization Protect Young Eyes. And he's actually been to Idaho before on behalf of like a couple of different bills. Senator Kevin Cook, he came and testified on one of his bills. So this guy is going to talk about kind of like the why, the how, and then what parents can do, particularly in their homes, to help their kids, you know, safeguard around technology.
It's like, yes.
Yep. So it's going to be great. He's awesome. And what was really kind of cool was when I was talking to a PTA in Idaho, they were telling me that they actually have already interacted with him and tried to do an event at their school, just like via Zoom. And it sounds like the internet was kind of spotty, so it wasn't that great. But what that tells me is people in Idaho know who this guy is and that he is having an impact on the space in which he is living. So we're really excited to bring him in for that. We also have Dr. Megan Smith, who is a professor at Boise State University, and she created what the organization Communities for Youth.
She's doing great work too.
She is doing great work.
All data driven. I mean, she's a very, very bright woman, and like, what can we do?
Yep. And she's really focusing around like, how can we make our communities better for our teenagers, like our youth, like, you know, our tweens and teenagers. And what she really focuses on youth mental health. And so she really does a nice job kind of creating, I mean, these speakers are going to do a great job creating a bridge between technology, computer use, how we're having social interactions with kids, and the impact on their mental health. And so we're going to be able to have like real-time information, real-time data that's going to be, I mean, this is one thing that Dr. Smith does a really great job on, is creating real data just from Idaho. We're not talking about the national level. We're talking about Idaho, which is great. It's relevant for us.
And her idea of communities is like, is it a school community? Is it like literally like a town community? Is it sports communities? Communities that foster better relationships and better engagements for youth, right? And like, let's bring it down. How do people feel with their mental health? Like, how anxious have they felt? How all of these things? And then can we make changes within those micro communities and actually get different results at the end? It's not like us just patting ourselves on the back as the adults, like, oh, this is what we did. Like, we're so great. We're moving the needle. No. Did it actually move the needle? Do we have real evidence that we can positively affect teen wellness, mental wellness, well-being in this way? And if we can, and if we find out how, then we can replicate those changes across those different communities across the state. Man, it's awesome.
It's awesome. And she focuses on what is referred to as upstream prevention. So it's not about like, oh, whack-a-mole where like an issue pops up, like
you're
crisis,
dealing with
like
acute crises. Yes.
Right. Where she's basically saying like, we're asking parents and teachers to be experts on everything when it comes to responding to all these crises. And she's saying if we focus on upstream prevention, we don't have to be an expert on everything because we're going to be preventing some of these components before they even pop up and become problems. So I love that. She's going to really she's going to dive into those things, which is going to be so good.
Yeah.
So good.
I view this as a bus kind of thing because perhaps not for the way that you might take it, but imagine I get hit by a bus.
Ooh.
Yeah, I know it's
Yikes.
bad. I know, but it only winged me. It was not good, but it was like, it's not like the classic movie Front and Center. It's like The Edge or like the Mirror or something. It doesn't matter, but I get hit by a bus. Okay. You can imagine the team of people involved to keep me alive. Now you have to have somebody who went through, K through 12, went to college, went to medical school, made it through residency, blah, blah, blah. And you need that person close to me, right? So now you have to have like an ambulance driver. You have to have people on the scene to like drag me out of the street and know to like not move my head because my neck could be broken, like all these different things. The insanity that would be involved in this horrible, horrible, horrible event, right? Or we make a community that promotes people to not walk on city streets while looking at their cell phone. And we have a self-reinforcing, cultural value of like, hey, have your head up. We do that. We prevent all the specialized intervention that comes when I get hit by the bus. And that's kind of like this, where it's like we have these acute events happening to our teenagers and our children, where they're committing suicide or they're attempting to commit suicide or they're like traumatized because they saw this horrible stuff on social media. I've never been a woman. I never will be a woman. And I've certainly never been a young woman considering a relationship with a man. And I heard in a couple years past, like how horrifying it is for a young woman. I think it's terrible for young men to see pornography, but I heard recently how horrifying it is for a young woman to see pornography and then think that there will be a man or a group of men doing those things to her. And like when I heard that, this was like 5 years ago, like it broke my heart. I was like, oh my God, I could not imagine. I am horrified I have 3 boys. I don't have any girls. And I was horrified for my boys to see porn. It's like, listen, guys, this is not only is it going to like short circuit your head, but it's like, this is not reality. Right. And again, all of those things, that's somebody getting hit by a bus. And those are damages you may not even see, and they might just carry with them for years that could be affecting them through untold relations, like the whole thing. It's like, oh my God, let's stop people from getting hit by the bus. Let's go upstream, whatever that means in a data-driven manner.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes and yes.
Yes.
Yes and yes. And then the other big group that we have coming in is the Dignity Index. They're out of Utah. I've talked about them several times on the podcast, but they're coming up and we've got they're 2 young 20-year-olds-ish, and they're going to be making a presentation. And the reason we want them there is because the Dignity Index is all about how to foster conversations that integrate dignity. So basically the concept is respect is earned, dignity is offered, because we are all human beings and really we all deserve kindness, or we should really offer kindness because we're all human beings. And so they have this scale of, what speech looks like. The 1 through 4 are different levels of contempt that people are offering and saying in their conversation. Right. And then 5 through 8 are what it looks like to offer dignity during a conversation. And the reason this matters in the realm of more social, less media, as we're talking about technology, as we're talking about upstream prevention for teenagers, is that we need teenagers and parents, and also teachers and parents and teachers and students, everyone,
sure,
whatever type of conversation we're having, we need people to be able to have those conversations without pointing fingers and mudslinging and all sorts of different things. I mean, that stuff happens and we see it every day. But if we can arm people with more information to better have conversations, then we're going to be able to address these things that need to be talked about, which are technology and the impacts they're having on our kids in this social setting. So we're really excited for the Dignity Index to be up here as well.
I'm excited for them in general, because I don't think it's just a triggering topic like tech in schools. Can I tell you something?
Please.
Okay. Episode that dropped for me today was Representative Heather Scott. And Representative Heather Scott had the first joint memorial resolution, whatever it might have been. The first thing that came out of the blocks was for this legislative session in Idaho was, hey, we need to communicate to the federal government and specifically the Supreme Court and tell them that we want them to revisit the 2015 same-sex marriage decision they came to. Because Heather Scott's bill saying, like, we think it's the state's right to decide these things, and it's not the federal government or the Supreme Court of the United States right. Now, that's something. Like, I had this conversation with her, and I found out what Heather Scott actually thought, which is she's like, listen, just give it to the state of Idaho. Let the state of Idaho decide. And if the state of Idaho wants it, great. And if the state of Idaho doesn't want it, great. She said for herself, she personally, being a very staunch Christian, which is like, awesome. You have the right to be a staunch Christian. She's like, I don't think it's a good idea, but like, that's it. And then we walked through this incredible conversation where we talked about like, hey, is it just the word marriage? Or do you like, if I was gay and I had a husband and we removed the same-sex marriage thing in Idaho, would you be okay if we made like marriage 2.0 or like domestic partnerships or something? So if he's dying in a hospital room, I can go in as his like next of kin. Or if we've adopted children, like we don't have some custody battle now because now we're technically not married. Like, could I have all of the same rights that married heterosexual couples have? Would you be against that? She's like, I don't think I'd be against it. Like, I don't know all the nuances, but no, like for me, it's really just this word marriage. So it's this beautiful conversation that I find out people are mad that I even had the conversation with her. Before the conversation published, I was getting calls this weekend from people saying, they're like, you should not have talked to him. I'm like, you don't even know what I said. You don't like, and that's absurd. She's an elected official of the state of Idaho who's putting forth legislation in the Idaho session. Like, are you crazy? Yeah, I should talk to her. We as Idahoans deserve to know what she thinks. And she as a human being deserves to have somebody who in good faith is just like, can you just explain this to me? You know, like, I'm not mad at you. Like, or maybe I am, but nobody would know, right? Like, whether I'm mad or not is irrelevant. She's an elected representative who deserves 5 minutes to just explain without defending herself what's going on. And I think that's a big piece of what the Dignity Index is doing. It's like, can we just get back to talking to people and having better, more respectable conversations? We do not have to agree. We do not have to get on the same board, but we have to tolerate each other. And it would be best if we respected each other, even in the absence of agreement. Like, can we just tend towards that?
Yes. And what I feel like the Dignity Index is trying to offer for people is that, well, like a byproduct of what they're putting out is an opportunity for people to look in the mirror and to say, how am I contributing to this pool of understanding? How am I contributing to the conversation? Am I making it more challenging for people to be able to show up and really kind of share their views? Or am I making it easier for people to be able just to voice their concern or their perspective? And to your point, it's not about agreeing on the thing because we all come from different perspectives. And there's some things that we're going to have to, really flush out because decisions have to be made. And that's why there's split votes on things and, all sorts of different topics.
Right.
But I know for me personally, like as a parent, I have a kid who's about to be 20. And he is like just in the prime of what it means to be a college student. And as he and I have had different conversations over the years, I know that my opinions and perspective on things are different from his. And in part because we are two different people. And one of the things that I have experienced that probably has been one of the greatest joys of my being a parent is that he is willing to hear me out and I'm willing to hear him out. And even after we say the things that we want to share and to say and to share our perspective I
like the shay.
Yeah.
The things that we wanted to shay.
The things that we wanted to say are that sometimes he's just like, I hear you and I don't agree with you, Mom, or my perspective is different than yours. And it's not that we come to this harmonious, agreement and we're moving forward. It's just that, hey, these things are out there on the table and we both understand. And because I love him, I want to understand. And so that's something that I just really love about the Dignity Index. And when I heard them a year ago, I saw a presentation in DC. I was like, I love this. This is incredible. They were pretty new about a year ago. And I want this to come to Idaho. I just have been working on a way, how can we like fit this into what we're doing? And when this More Social, Less Media event like kind of popped up, and like it was definitely, I heard from parents that this was an interest for them to talk about technology and to hear these impacts. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a fantastic venue to bring them in. So I'm really excited about that.
I'm pumped. I'm very excited too.
So, and then the other thing just about the event is that there's going to be not only is there going to be a keynote speaker and some other like I mentioned, Dr. Megan Smith and the Dignity Index kind of in this big auditorium, but there's going to be workshops offered, Q&A panels, and an opportunity for people to kind of like sit around and talk about topics and get get feedback and real-time interaction just with maybe the group that you've come with or a different, group that is there. And then also like booths and tables for resources and just different, like not just resources, but also different things that are in your community, resources just in reference to like technology or other offerings that are out there. Some people just are not aware of what else is out there. So to be able to kind of just like lay it out on the table to say, here are all of the things in one space for you to kind of like take a great look around so that people can be armed with good information, great resources for them to take into their homes and their school communities. That's what like this is all about.
Do you have Central District Health coming to present resources yet?
No.
I will get them.
Okay, that'd be awesome.
I will get Central District because they do a lot of presentations they have like a giant blow up brain that they show like different areas that get affected from drugs and things like that. But the social media is by far the most widely distributed drug dealer like ever. Like you can get anything you want off of Snapchat all the time. And, again, they like fighting against that as well.
So I love it. More Social, Less Media. So the More Social, Less Media event. Yeah. There's like the slogan and there's the event. So More Social, Less Media event, Saturday, April 26th from 10 to 2 at Eagle High School. Mark your calendars. We're really excited for that. And then just like as a note, there's going to be something on the eastern side of the state on September 30th as well. That's the tentative date, which I'm really excited about. So it's not just...
Another More Social, Less Media event. Mm-hmm. Oh, so you're hitting 2 areas of the state.
Yeah, we're going to hit.
Bless you.
I know. We're really excited about it. So we've got like a group of parents that are going to be working on it over there. They've got great speakers and resources. Their event's going to look a little bit different than the one on the western side of the state. And we're just excited that we're going to be able to bring these opportunities and information to people. Like that's the thing that I'm really just most excited about. And
Are you going to the one on the east?
Yeah, I'll go over there.
Look at you.
Look at me.
How far away is it? Like 4 hours?
Yeah, it's like 4 hours, 20 minutes from my house. So it's a nice drive. It's a quick, you listen to some songs, you listen to some podcasts.
Plus you get to drive through the Magic Valley and like Jerome and everything. That's a cool spot.
Yeah, it's way cool. So, and just to note, like, just in terms of like Our Kids Are Schools, I mean, you and I have had these conversations off air, but Our Kids Are Schools is a podcast, but it's also like an organization, and like the website is up and coming. It's pretty soon. It's pretty close. So the More Social, Less Media in Our School Communities is a campaign, kind of like a place that's going to live on the Our Kids Our Schools website. And it's going to there's going to be resources there and things that are unfolding. So I'm really excited about that too. And as I've shared this idea with school community leaders and with lawmakers, everyone's really excited about it. So this is something that like is kind of, it's ongoing and developing, and I'm really, really happy about it.
Yeah. And just the premise that it's like, listen, these really are our schools. They're our schools that our kids go to, and we need to provide information, which I see you doing, like providing information like nobody else is about about what the system is, how to affect your system, how to deal with curriculum issues or connect with people, and what effective communication mechanisms. Because now, like, I'll tell you what, in my kid's school district, it's hilarious. There are a couple people that like just try to throw grenades all day long. Like they'll hear something and it's like a rumor, and then they just get on parent instead of going to like a principal or a teacher and saying, "Hey, is everything good with this?" And overwhelmingly, because when I hear about this stuff, I just take the rumor or whatever it is and go straight to the head and be like, "Hey, is this a thing?" And they're like, "No, that's not a thing." And they explain why. I'm like, "Okay." I take the information back. I'm like, "Stop doing what you're doing. Like, you're just upsetting people. This isn't reality." But people, I think that at least in some part comes from an intimidation or not understanding like what the mechanism is for communication or understanding who the players are. It's like, okay, these are your board members. They're your elected people, right? Like we vote for them and they direct the school district. So like talk to your school site first, right? Because the board members cover a lot of different schools and campuses, and then elevate from there. Like if they're school site people, say you're your teacher or the principal, you're not getting the answer you want, or you don't feel like you're able to connect with them, perhaps reach out to your school board member, like they'll know, or like the whole bit. It's just, people don't know that. And I didn't know that until I actually met you and I started listening to things you're saying. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I had no idea. And again, educating people about the system that's here for us and by us is really important.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Something just like popped up because we have kids in the same school district. Indeed we do. And a friend called me and she was like, hey, you should be aware of this thing. It actually has nothing to do with me. I did not respond to it, but it was something that she made me aware of. And what happened was there was something at a school and a parent saw, and then a parent took that thing, made some really big assumptions and posted it on social media, like created an account and made some really big noise.
We're living in a reality television series.
We are.
This is it. Like if you just open up your eyes, you will get the best entertainment ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then this person, and I don't even know who this was, but they made a social media page for it. And they were they were really hot and bothered. And they were like, hey, everyone needs to go to the school board meeting and you guys, let your voices heard, all the things. And what I learned was that as they were sharing this stuff and, they got a lot of people pretty quickly. And, as they were sharing about the school board meeting, and then the school board meeting came and the school board meeting went. And I'm going to tell you how many people, this is what I heard, showed up to this event from this social media page. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
0.
Yep.
0 showed up. And so what this tells me is a couple of things. One, it is so important to see where the information is coming from. Like who is behind the movements that are creating so much splash and trying to almost make headliney things that aren't really headlines. So it's important for us as individuals to do our research when it comes to who's trying to make a big splash and what are they trying to do behind it. Second thing is that these parents who made this big splash and they tried to make, they were trying to make it, they cared about this thing that they weren't aware of. And instead of going to the school and asking questions and understanding, and hey, if you go to the school and you ask questions and you understand and you're like, you know what, this really isn't right, and then you want to go do your thing, be my guest. It's your American right to do so. But
God bless them. Go hard.
But if you see the thing and respond and not, excuse me, you're not responding, you're reacting, and then you go and gather the information and you're making this big, huge point, and you actually don't have the good information to back yourself up, it's garbage. In my mind, it's total garbage. I'm just saying it.
Can I tell you something?
Yes.
I got to tell you something.
Oh
this is so great. So one instance of this is a parent in a school that will not be named loses them damn mind and starts telling all of these other parents that there's a kid using the wrong bathroom at this school. Okay. And makes an allegation that a kid that looks like a girl was actually a boy. Okay. And I hear this wait, I volunteer in that class. What do you mean? Right. And of course, instead of going to this crazy parent who's going off the rails and getting everyone upset, I go straight to the school and say, hey, here's the deal, principal. Some people are saying this. I'm just curious, is this fact or fiction? And the principal said, hey, man, that's fiction. We don't have any instances of this, blah, 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 blah. I come to find out, and I let the parent know, the parent that's going bonkers. I come to find out this same parent continued up the chain of command, going all the way to the top of the district, screaming at that this student had, and mind you, we're talking about elementary children, lower end elementary children. So it's not uncommon to have a first or a second grader that's kind of ambiguous-y, especially depending on the hair, right? The hairstyles determine a lot, right? Especially over mask time. So it was anyway, the point is, it goes on and is making allegations that this poor kid had gotten gender reassignment surgery. No evidence to support this at all. right? She didn't have like, she hadn't talked to the parents. She hadn't talked to, anything, all of this stuff, and was like losing her mind at these school people. And they were like, what are you talking about? Like, do you have any evidence to support your allegation at all? The answer is no. The answer is no. And it's like, what do you do? I mean, there are some people that you just can't stop. They're forces of nature.
They're forces of nature. You cannot stop them. But I think for us as like consumers, right? And like as parents, as we're looking at these different things that pop up, I would love it. And I'm just going to say this, and you don't have to agree with me or not, but I would love it if more parents would respond in the way that you did. So instead of like reacting and like hopping on that train and getting all hot and bothered and be like, yeah, yeah, that they respond in a way that's measured. And they say, wait a second, is this true or not?
I'm actually going to push back on you a little bit on this because I don't get a lot of wins in my life for many things, but being a reasonable person that gets a hold of the principal, I do get that win. And if more people did it, I would not be special. If the average parent just goes straight to the principal, Matt would not look reasonable. And I'm a terrible person. This is the only place where I win. Don't take this away from me.
Oh my gosh.
They need to go harder and crazier on social media.
Matt. That is so selfish.
I couldn't be more. Listen to me. I don't get a lot of wins. I'm just asking you to don't spread the word that being reasonable is the play.
Don't spread the word that being reasonable is the play.
I can't believe you didn't take me up on my offer for beef jerky earlier. It's really good. It's Snake River. I'm trying to get a sponsorship. It's all I eat all day long because I'm in the studio recording for like 10 hours. I'm like, just beef jerky. It gets stuck in my teeth.
Oh my gosh.
Like, yeah, anyway.
Okay, the last thing that I just like wanted to mention.
Maybe
quickly.
they'd like to sponsor more social less media. Snake River. Hook it up. Like, can we just get bags of beef jerky at your social media event?
Matt Todd wants sponsorship. Okay, the last thing that I want to mention is that you and I were recently, we just had a conversation with Superintendent Debbie Critchfield, and in this conversation, she handed us, because it's like just public knowledge, like it's out there, is I'm like moving this over, so it's like sitting in front of me. She handed us a big long a packet of all of the different requirements for public schools in the state of Idaho. And she was like, hey, these are all the things that our public schools are required to do. And I like went through this list, and I am making the assumption, because I like went through and was looking at them, that they're not duplicates. Like these lists are all like individual things. And I will tell you that like as it was like looking, like it lists like program or funding requirement, and then it lists who it's required by.
State or federal, yes.
State or federal. I read the word state over 300 times, around 300 times. I read the state name around 300 times, which tells me that there are a lot of requirements on our public schools. And I'm not saying I'm not saying it's bad. That's not what Alexis Morgan is saying, but I'm saying that there's a lot of requirements in our public schools.
Well, can I add something onto it?
Yeah.
Just the very existence of these requirements also necessitates somebody defending the successful integration of these requirements. So public schools like West Ada, public school districts, have an army of administrators. Everybody blames administrative bloat, all of the money's at the top, like all these administrators. They have to have an army of administrators whose sole job is to defend their successful integration of these requirements all day, every day. Because West Ada's got like 40-something campuses. Right. Let's just take
no. There's like 56 schools, 57 schools in West Ada.
Great. A lot of schools, a lot of schools. And then schools of choice. And they also oversee several charter schools, like all of this stuff. Right. And to imagine somebody going around and having to collect data from each of these schools. There was a representative recently, a senator, I can't remember, an elected official who recently brought forth a proposal to we have a cursive reading and writing requirement.
This is Senator Tammy Nichols.
Yes, she's coming on. She's coming on Friday. I'm very excited to talk to her. Okay. But she was saying, hey, and I saw this video and she was saying, hey, we have this requirement, but do we have any way to like actually figure out if we're fulfilling this requirement or not? And so she was like, we should have some kind of like testing or reporting metric to make sure. So it's like, okay, you have this requirement. Yeah, it'd be good to have a reporting mechanism to make sure you're fulfilling your requirement. And we're just adding on not just more requirements, but then more administrators who have to go around and figure out some way to like collect the reporting data and, like verify that they are in fact doing these things, which is, again, fantastic if you want to do that. I don't care. But when people criticize the public school system for having like a bloated administrative body, it's like, what do you like? They're not. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things that they are required to verify on an annual basis, and it's never ending and it's always increasing, and it's wild.
It is wild.
It's wild.
It is wild. And so I wanted to bring this up for a couple of different reasons. One, and it's mostly because I know there's lots of different people that listen to the show. Like there's parents, there's teachers, there's administrators, there's school board members, lawmakers. And I'm really grateful for that. I'm really grateful that there are a variety of people, even outside of the state of Idaho, who are listening, because one of my goals for the show is to get information to people. And sometimes you're going to hear my opinion on it, but to get information to people so that they can make decisions, so they can be informed about the thing that's happening, right? The thing that's going on.
The things.
So two things that I think are really important to note. And one of them you just kind of like brought up, which was, I don't know that it like really, it's not an offshoot of what you just said, but it kind of ties into what.
Just spit it out.
Like,
whatever.
Okay. Whatever. Okay. I'll get to the point. So it's that, okay, I'm right. So it's that like, hey, lawmakers are the ones who are at the table, who are making these different rules for public schools to follow, along with the Board of Education and the Department of Education, right? Sure. Like we have all these different players. They're the ones who are making these rules. And right now, what we have in place are some of these same lawmakers who have been making these rules for decades that our public schools have to follow, are now saying, you know what? We don't actually like what the public school is producing, or we don't actually like some of these things, or we don't feel like it's the best option. And so what we want to do is we want to create another option for you. And we want to take these public funds and we want to distribute them to private schools. That's something that is happening here. And so what they're doing from my perspective, from the perspective of Alexis Morgan, host of Our Kids, Our Schools, is that they are ignoring the problem that is in front of them. They are ignoring the roughly 300 regulations from the state that is required to our public schools, some of which were created by them. And they are now saying, we're going to ignore that and we want to go over here to this shiny new thing that we want to bring to Idaho. And I think that that is such a disservice to the Idaho kids, to the 94%, roughly 94% of Idaho kids who are in public schools, to say, you know what, we were a part of creating this thing that you are experiencing. And instead of addressing that and some of these things that we've created, and maybe we need to make adjustments and all those different things, we are now going to come over here and create this different shiny thing that actually isn't really going to serve you, 94% Idaho kids. It's going to serve a different population, probably, a majority of which are already enrolled in private schools. Maybe a couple of public school kids are going to come. It's really going to serve the kids that are in the Treasure Valley, not the 70% of the rural school districts that we have in Idaho. And so I think that that is a major disservice, but ultimately, I would like people to really think about that. That's something that I want people to think about, to say, okay, a lot of current lawmakers have been a part of all these different regulations that are required by our public schools. They've been a part of that, and they're impacting the 94% of Idaho kids that are in public schools. But now they're going to come over here and they're going to focus on this shiny and new thing that they want to bring to Idaho that really isn't going to be a benefit to the 94% of Idaho kids that are in public schools, and that is not addressing the issues that they have, that these lawmakers that are creating this new thing over here, it's not addressing the issues that they don't like about our public schools.
Listen, I am pro-education through and through. And I was talking to Quinn Perry from ISBA last week and said, look, I am pro-education if it's on the moon, if it's private, if it's public. I just spoke with Rod Grammer, who's the former Idaho Businesses for Education president. And it's like, I want, and he wants, the most educated populace coming to the businesses and employers and, the innovation, everything possible. Like, that's what we both want, right? And we have a Representative Chris Mathias actually went to a voucher school program, and I think it's like Massachusetts or something. There it is. Mm-hmm. And he said it's one of the oldest voucher programs, and that's like, he's a very intelligent guy. It's like, okay, like, so it's not that it can't work, but all I want, we talk about these requirements. People talk about the free market. They talk about how our schools are broken. One, if they're broken, tell me how they're broken specifically. Are the requirements too burdensome? Academic, like you have to articulate, is it academics? Because like if it's academics, let's talk specific academics, like all these things. But all I want is, hey, can the private schools successfully outcompete the public schools if they have to adhere to the exact same regulation? And if the answer is no, they can't because it would be too burdensome, then fix the regulation. And if the answer is yes, they can outcompete them using the same regulation, then offer them the same regulation and give them all the money. Like if you can get whatever you want, just let's keep the even playing field. And if you think that private schools can outcompete like Renaissance High School or Galileo, like that's fine. Just make sure that they're adhering to the exact same requirements. And if you're saying they can't compete under those terms, then why should we expect the public school to compete under those terms? Like if the terms are too damaging for the private industry, then rip them out of the public industry too. Like, I don't know, like I'm in for the best, smartest kids. If you think we have restrictions that are hampering the success of our public schools, let's eliminate those restrictions, just like you people want to for the private school. Let's even it out. Let's go crazy. Let's turbocharge our education industry, but let's just keep it even no matter what and see who wins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to your point, I want people to be thinking about what the actual problems are.
Yeah.
And are people coming to the table to actually address those real problems? So there was actually just a study. I just saw it on social media. I thought it was really cool. Like there's this study out of Harvard that's looking at how is the collection of data from the No Child Left Behind Act, which came out in about 2001-ish. How is that act, which requires state to gather information based on certain types of tests, how has that improved education? Like, how has that improved the educational outcomes for our kids?
Right.
And basically, the study shows that it's not. It's not. The data collection of those specific tests that we want our kids that our kids are required to take from, I mean, the federal government mandated these initially, and then the state had to integrate and all those different things. It's the data shows that it's not improving outcomes for our kids. Actually, it says research shows that this focus on data analysis has not improved student learning outcomes. And I think that that's really like profound. And now that what does it say? Yeah, studies by Harvard professors to that point are showing that these, analyzing all this data are not improving student outcomes. Okay, now we know that after 24 years, it's not helping student outcomes. So to the idea of, hey, let's get around the table because these requirements that are even on the state level are not improving student outcomes. Let's look at these requirements that have been mandated by the state and see what maybe needs to be removed from the equation so that schools can do what they do best, which is educate kids.
Yeah, and this is, I love that. It's like, okay, all of this focus on these standardized tests is not helping. Okay, great, no problem. And the good news is we've had this free and independent private education system operating for like centuries, right? Like how long ago did Harvard, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Like centuries, we've had this private education system. And if we want better free education funded by the state, all we have to do is say, okay, what's the most successful private school doing? Does it have like special whiteboards? Do they have like special books? Do they have like better teachers? Like what is there a systemic thing? Is it a pay? Like because they're like, hey, we'll pay you $50,000 instead of $40,000, whatever it is. If you want a better education for the populace, then like, why don't we just integrate those things? And if part of integrating those things is, hey, you can kick out any kid you want, rip the lowest 50% off your roster and drop them. Anybody who acts up, kick them out. Offer no explanation, no parent rights. That will give you the most educated and successful populace. Okay, great. But like, is that what we want for our public education system? That they just like kick people out unceremoniously and then like, that's it.
Well, and I just heard Quinn Perry, the deputy chief from the ISBA, on your show last week say that America is like, we are the first country to say, hey, we want to educate all of our people. We want an educated public. And so that's one of the reasons that the public school system was created, so that we could educate our kids. And yeah, I mean, to your point, like private school can kick out kids. They don't have to take everyone. They get to choose who their population is. But also, you just had Dr. Derek Bubb, superintendent of West Ada, on your show, and he spoke about how they have like the highest I mean, these are test scores. Okay, we're just going back to tests here.
Sure.
But to the idea that like they have in this public school, they're doing some really great things to produce
higher higher SAT score results than the best private school area.
And by the way, like West Ada is not the only school district that's doing that. The Lewiston School District is producing like great student outcomes, and there's lots of school districts around the state that are doing that. And so it's like, whoa. Maybe the question is not just like, okay, like, are there some great top performers in private schools? Totally. What's that private school doing? And also, what are some of our public schools doing? I mean, this was almost like the purpose. Like, I actually just heard the Senate Ed Committee say when they were talking about, it was the Charter School Commission. They were what is it? It's not the word advising, but they were like, completing the appointment or whatever.
Sure.
Okay. Approving the appointment of specific people to the Charter School Commission for the state of Idaho. And one of the things one of the committee members said was that, when charter schools were created, one of the main purposes in the state of Idaho was to say, okay, charter school, you're going to do like this one special thing or a couple of special things. And it really kind of is a testing ground to see if these things that you are doing are going to produce great outcomes for our students. And if that's true, we want to take some of those great things that you're doing and integrate them into our public schools. But this committee member said that has not been happening. And so they kind of a little bit of the conversation was try to determine why isn't that happening. But then the second thing was to say, since that's not happening, we want the Charter School Commission to figure out how we can do that, because we don't need to we need to see where the good things are occurring, and then we need to like replicate that in other places so that we can do that for our Idaho kids.
Let's go hard. And the number one thing for me, just kick out the bad kids.
Oh my gosh, that's so bad.
I'll jack up the results. Of course, I'm kidding. But what I'm saying is, like, you can jack up the results of any educational base just by having a not open enrollment. And again, I'm pro education. Like, let's come up with the best thing, but let's not think this other thing over here is great, because they can restrict who gets in. Like, let's unleash the contractors. Like, I would throw my hat in as like a government contractor. Like, I had an SAT program, right? Schools don't do SAT stuff, but if they did, and they were like, okay, this is our school SAT program, and like Matt has this SAT program over here. Hey, let me outcompete them, because I love. First off, get me in front of 16-year-olds. I go ham, like it's wild, and it's like do the contractor thing. We have contractors like Elon Musk and SpaceX. That's a government contractor, and they're doing things that NASA couldn't. Fine. But they're also like, hey, we're going to give you this money, but like, you can't blow people up. And he's like, shoot. Okay. It's like, it's really hard. They're like, you also can't like tell the Chinese about this. He's like, okay, fine. So like, he has all these restrictions and requirements that, are really, really important that you have to observe, right? I'm all for that. Let's just make it a real contractor thing. Like if Bishop Kelly wants state funds, then be like, awesome, go ham. Here are the requirements to get this money. And then Bishop Kelly can determine, okay, is it in my financial best interest? Can I do this first, at least breaking even? Can I do it at a profit? And breaking even or at a profit, can I do it better, right? Or is this going to hurt me? I don't know why we don't just do that. Like, that seems so straightforward.
Well, but one of the things that I think about is like, okay, like when I think about private schools, for example, I mean, they're a business, right? I mean, it's a business. They want to turn a profit and all those different things. And I think
some are nonprofits, aren't they? I'm sure it's possible to have a private school that's a nonprofit.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah. Anyways, they're an entity that has to have finance. They have to be solvent.
Yes.
Right.
And they exist outside the government purview, like the public school purview. Okay.
Right.
I actually imagine that a lot of private schools like existing outside the government purview. They want to run it as a business. They want to determine what is going to be best for their business model. So I imagine that they don't want government regulation. So I imagine possibly that there's going to be, if for some foreseeable thing that vouchers like pass in the state of Idaho and they come in, that there is probably some private schools who will say, you can't actually bring those public funds over here if there's going to be
strings attached.
If there's going to be strings attached, if there's going to be requirements attached, because they don't want the requirements. Hence, one of the reasons they're a private school. Because they like operating that way. Right. They like being able to say, you're
we're coming,
out.
We're going, you're out, you're in, you're whatever.
This is what we're doing. Parents, you don't actually have rights here. Like kids, you don't have you don't have due process here. We like that because that's how we want to run our business.
Right.
So like,
I'm all for competition and this type of market force. It's like I was talking to a Rod Grammer about school cafeterias, and I did not articulate it perfectly. But it's like if you want, if you want, say we're like, hey, I know what we're going to do. We're going to eliminate the cafeterias in all of our public schools, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to contract with a local industrial kitchen or commercial kitchen, and they're going to supply all of our food. We won't have to have a lunch lady. We won't have to pay her retirement. We won't have to have a janitorial staff clean up the area. We're going to have box lunches. They're all going to be stacked up. You just come and grab one. You pay for it. That's it. That's it. We'll have zero facilities cost. And we're like, actually, that's a great idea that I just thought. I came up with this earlier today. I'm working it out now in my head. Like a bunch of pie boxes that are just like a lunch, and you have like your sandwich or your whatever. Right. You get it. Great. But you can't say like, all right, there's no drink involved. It's like, no. You have to have a drink. You have to have like a milk or a juice. Or they're like, okay, we're going to go all meat. Like we're not going to have a vegetarian or like whatever it might be. Or like, you have 400 students, we're only bringing 350. It's like, no. You gotta feed all 400. You gotta have a milk or a juice option. It's gotta, like, you need it twice a day. Like, you gotta fill these requirements that the lunch lady over here, she's been killing herself on her feet all hours a day with bunions and swollen ankles. Like, she's killing herself to deliver this school lunch. Everybody knows that lunch lady. And God bless her, she was the best. And like you gotta fulfill all of these things. And if you can do it and you can do it cheaper at a profit, God bless it, do it. Like, let's do that real competition where, we save cafeteria space, right? We had that problem in Salmon. They had the open sewer pipe underneath the cafeteria. If they had just contracted, they wouldn't even need to be in the cafeteria.
Oh my gosh.
Just contract for something.
Oh my gosh.
The lunch lady won't have to step on the sewage.
I feel like this conversation was like, yes. And now it's like, bleh.
Listen, if you want to ruin it, just bring me on.
Oh my gosh.
I think this is a fair point, though.
Okay.
It's a fair point. If you want to insert a contractor, do it. Just make the contractor do everything else that we already have to do.
There you go. And that's how Matt Todd feels about it. Thank you.
I'm pro-education.
You're
pro-education.
Go-education. Okay, so at the end of the episode, we do our, 2 key takeaways here. And so...
Can I do mine first?
Yes, please. I was actually just going to ask you that. Will you do yours first, Matt?
I was the wrong guest for you to have on. God bless America. What's your takeaway?
Oh my gosh, is that really your takeaway for today? Oh my gosh.
No, I think
a real one.
I have a real one. I love the education discussion. I feel like our state is deeply grappling with this. If the vouchers, if school choice passes, I think there will be a really robust conversation to be had.
Wait a second. I want to be really clear. We have 9 options for school choice. So this rhetoric that this is a school choice option is inaccurate because we have 9 options in the state of Idaho. So would you please rephrase with that in mind, Matt Todd?
I thought this was a safe space, but whatever. Let me rephrase. If it comes to pass that public tax dollars are being sent with no or low strings attached to private educational entities, and if that gets passed in the legislature, I think that there are enough interested parties in the state that we will have a really robust discussion about that. Either people trying to run not reprimand, but
referendum.
It's an R word. That one really gets me.
Yeah.
There will be people running a referendum. There will be lawsuits. There will be all kinds of things. And that tension will probably, hopefully, make better things happen. And if it doesn't pass, if we don't have the case come to pass where we have taxpayer dollars going to private entities with low or no strings attached, we'll either have taxpayer dollars going with the exact same strings attached, which I'm all for. Like, have at it, right? Take the money. You just got to do this like 500 things. Or it will bring to like the conversation that is starting to develop and come to the surface is like, what do you want from your public school? Is it academics? Is it just like theology? Do you want religious studies? Like, what do you want from your public schools? If we can improve them academically, great. If we need to reduce the regulation on them so they can perform even better academically, great. If you want something not related to academics, what's that thing? Do you want like a safer campus? We can work on that. I know Representative Mathias is working on safer campuses right now. If you want less political statements like flags. People think flags outside of the U.S. and Idaho flag are political statements. Representative Hill is working on that right now. West Ada has had a no flag policy aside from Idaho or a U.S. flag for years. Like, okay, what is it? Can we go down the list? I want safer campuses. I want no bullying. I want no discussion of sexual preference. I want boom, boom, boom. I want the 3 R's. I want all these. Let's talk about what people want. And this robust tension, I feel like, is bringing to light, like, hey, what do you want? And if we can find out what people want, we can work towards that. I don't think we'll be able to do everything. If somebody's like, I want a Bible class. I want people to be required to go to mass every single day, like in a Catholic school, in the public school. Yeah, I don't think the public sphere will be able to do that. But if we can check every other box, Idaho kids win.
Thank you for sharing that, Matt. That's awesome. Thanks for your takeaway.
You're like, my takeaway, you're full of shit.
No. My takeaway from the conversation is that I am really grateful. Like, I do have a lot of gratitude for people who go and are learners, people who are willing to listen to different perspectives and understand different components. I just actually saw, it was a reel that you put out with Representative Heather Scott, and it was regards to flags. Like, she was talking about flags and she was giving her interpretation of a flag, and you were like, oh, really? Like, that's not how I view that flag. But ultimately, like, her point was that, like, she just thinks that the state should be determining what type of flags are flown at, like, government buildings.
Yes.
And I went through the comment section because I was like, oh, I'm kind of interested. Like, how are, Idahoans responding? Like, how are other people responding? And regardless of what people's interpretation was of the flag, their takeaway was, yeah, we think that that's something that, like, should be determined by the state or federal government, and that, like, there should only be 2 flags flown. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, hey, here's a perspective, right? Like, here's this perspective, and maybe Matt didn't even like agree with Representative Scott's perspective, like the angles in which they were coming from, and you don't offer your, real opinion on there.
No, the real question was, should it be controlled by the state or controlled by local municipalities? That was my question. She's like, it should be controlled by the state.
Yeah. And, but the thing that I really liked about that was that for the 40 comments that I read, first of all, people actually were really respectful, whether they, like, regardless of what their interpretation of the flag was. But then they were kind of like, I was learning from that experience.
Yes.
And that was something that I personally really treasure, where people can, like, show up and have the conversation or offer their perspective, contribute to that pool of understanding, and then come away with more information,
right?
Or like better understanding my perspective, like, kind of, digging deep into that. And so with that said, I, like, attended the Idaho Business for Education put on the Legislative Academy at the 1st of January. And as I was sitting there and learning about vouchers from an individual like Dr. Josh Cowan, who has been studying vouchers for 20 years, like, this is like, he's an expert on vouchers in the United States. I saw a lot of lawmakers in that room, and I was like, wasn't aware, like, I didn't know all the lawmakers, but I could see their tags on their, on their jackets, and I didn't know what their perspective was, but I was really grateful that they were learning, because it's so important for us to, like, gather the information, to digest, like, how we feel about it, and then show up to the table to have the conversation. And so, like, my real wish is, like, around public education, is that I want us to look at all these requirements that we have for our state. Okay, there is a reason right now that we're looking at this stuff. It's because, like, the table is hot. Like, there are some hot topics right now, and these hot topics are forcing us to say, okay, what's actually really going on here? Like, what do these requirements really mean for our public schools? And how are these, like, are we creating the best atmosphere for our Idaho kids? And so let's look at these things, but in order to do that, adults have to come to the table. And I do know right now that not all lawmakers are willing to come to the table to really address some of these issues. And so I'm hoping that more lawmakers will come to the table to address these issues, and that when they do, and people who are already sitting around the table will offer the dignity that we all deserve as human beings. I don't have to agree with you, Matt Todd, but I can certainly offer you the dignity that you deserve because you're a human being. And
you can, but you don't.
I do too. I do too. And that is what I hope. And, like, that's the takeaway. That's my takeaway from this conversation. And, that relates to the more social, less media event, that relates to, like, the voucher conversation, that relates to all of these different requirements that we have on our public schools. We need to have the conversation because our Idaho kids deserve for that conversation to occur among the
Yeah.
adults. Full stop.
Full stop. God bless it.
Well, since this is my episode, my podcast, you always like end so well. You're like, God bless it. Thanks for coming on. I'm just going to say thanks so much, Matt, for coming on. I really appreciate you and I really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you for having me. I always have a great time.
Fantastic.